Well, Patriot J here. Hopefully the lighting is making me visible. I was wrestling with this stuff. And I'm wrestling with, well, like right now, I just came back from grabbing my ball cap and changing shirts, and I'm an old man, I have lung trouble, and I'm kind of out of breath. So, this is how it is. USS Coral Sea, that was my second ship, both aircraft carriers, because I was in aviation. I can promise you that I could not run to general quarters or run down the flight deck or whatever kind of things I did back then anymore. I'm too old, I'm too fat, I'm too out of shape, and I have too many health issues. But I'm still pretty healthy for a guy that's as old and sick as I am, so let's go with that. But now, I'm a rodeo fan, among other sports, but rodeo, one thing that rodeo does for me that a lot of other sports generally don't, and I say generally because this isn't all the time, but generally do for me is I have never been to a rodeo that didn't start with a prayer and the national anthem. And I've been going to rodeos since I was, well, to use a saying we use here in the Midwest a lot, knee-high to a grasshopper. So, and by the way, great rodeo, I have been to some big ones. Now, I've never been to the NFR, and I do want to go before I die. But I have been to some big rodeos. I've also been to some very small rodeos. One of my absolute favorites happens every year, usually in May, in Abbeville, Kansas. Which, oddly enough, Abbeville is a very small town, and yet a top rodeo announcer, Justin McKee, and a very top rodeo clown, Justin Rumford, both come from there. Now, Justin Rumford's grandpa raised rodeo bucking stock there. His dad still lives there, even though he, and still raises some rodeo stock, I believe, even though he coaches, or was coaching the last time I checked, the rodeo team at Fort Hays State University, which is a couple hours drive away from there. But that's not uncommon for rodeo people to be that dedicated. But the Abbeville Rodeo, you can sit so close to the action that the rough stock kicks dirt on you. It's great. But then, when you've been around rodeo and livestock and ranching and all your life, it's kind of like in MASH where they found Sophie and gave her a Colonel Potter, and he was coming around the horse and stepped in a road apple, and Major Burns said it was disgusting, and Colonel Potter said, "Son, to me that's a tiptoe in the tulips." You've been around it all your life. This has been your life. You dig it. But I'm getting sidetracked as usual. If there's anything I'm great at, it's digression. What I really wanted to come to was, and I'm sorry I did not manage to save this video, but it was on YouTube and you should be able to find it. I believe it was at a football game. But the person singing the national anthem, sound system quit on. So, the entire crowd picked it up for him, sang the national anthem. This is another one of those, like when I was talking about the cowboy getting the steer off I-40, or the man saving the two little girls from Florida 1A1 or A1A, whatever it is. This is the kind of everyday hero thing that I love. Some years back, high school here in Kansas was told by the school district's attorney, who was probably the only attorney in town anyway, small towns don't have very many, that they had to stop having a prayer before. They had, for years, had a member of the Ministerial Alliance going out for a prayer before every football and basketball game. They were told they had to quit that. That it violated some order of the Supreme Court. And whether I mean U.S. Supreme Court or state Supreme Court, I couldn't tell you. Could be both. So the first football game of the year, the announcer, at the request of the superintendent of schools, who didn't want the fans upset by not having their customary prayer, announced that for legal reasons, the school district could no longer have a member of the Ministerial Alliance come and say a prayer before the game. So they would move on to the national anthem. Except you didn't hear him say, "We will move on to the national anthem," even though he had the loudspeaker. Because the entire crowd, at the top of their lungs, proceeded to recite the Lord's Prayer. They were going to have their prayer, and if the Supreme Court didn't like the school district sponsoring it, fine. The parents and spectators and students would do it. Now, I may have mentioned on this channel, I have on others, and on one channel that's what I do. I am an ordained minister. In fact, just a little while before taping this, I taped a message for my Mark 16:15 Ministries channel. And they'll both go up probably this evening, once I get them edited. But being a Christian and a minister, I see that as heroism too, not just because of its defense of religious liberty, which I'm big on, but because it shows that those students, those parents, those spectators were not going to have their First Amendment right to free expression of their religious beliefs taken away by some court order that actually probably nobody in that town had ever complained about. And it wasn't long after that I happened to be looking at the website for the Leota Wichita County High School. the state. This was some years ago, though. And the cheerleaders had posted a prayer. They're students. There's nothing you can do about it. Student-led prayer has been declared constitutional. You can't stop the students. You're getting in the way of their First Amendment rights if you do. So they went with that on the website. The heroism that stands up for rights. Now, I'm not for forcing my faith on somebody else, but I'm also not for being forced to hide my faith because of somebody else. First Amendment says Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of a religion. That's what it says. It says that Congress can't establish a state religion. It doesn't say a blooming thing about Congress needs to get in the way of people exercising their religious beliefs. And in fact, it says just the opposite, that Congress cannot get in the way. Well, if Congress can't liken the courts, because for a long time we had courts that made up a lot of stuff that wasn't actually in the Constitution. We're getting rid of some of that now, and I'm thrilled by that. But to me, the heroes are not the more recently appointed Supreme Court justices that are overturning bad decisions from previous courts that made up stuff that isn't in the Constitution. The heroes are the ones who stand up for their own rights, but also the rights of others. You want to be an atheist? Fine. I think you should be an atheist if that's what you want. And I think you should be able to proudly declare that you're an atheist if that's what you want. As long as you remember that as long as you can declare that you proudly declare that you're an atheist, I should be able to proudly declare that I'm a Christian. And the Muslim guy should be able to proudly declare that he's a Muslim. The Buddhist should be able to proudly declare that he's a Buddhist. The Jew should be able to proudly declare that he's a Jew. Whether you want to buy it or not, atheism is a religion. You're putting faith in something. You're putting faith in that there's nothing to put faith in. That's religion. So, stand up for your own rights, but stand up for the other fellow's rights too. Now, 9 years, U.S. Navy. I put my life on the line for your rights, but I also put them on the line for my rights. Let's honor both.